Penguin Random House Audio presents The Taking of K-129. How the CIA used Howard Hughes to steal a Russian sub in the most daring covert operation in history. By Josh Dean. Read for you by Neil Hellegers. The ability to get to the verge without getting into the war is the necessary art. John Foster Dulles. The only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture a little way past them into the impossible. Arthur C. Clarke. In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. Winston Churchill. If ever legends and stories of American technological genius were deserved and not yet realized, they would be about the scientists and engineers, the wizards of the CIA. Robert M. Gates. For my dad, who needs to stick around for a few more books. Prologue. Unexpected Visitors. November 1969. As he often did in the morning, Curtis Crook was reviewing projects with members of his engineering staff when his intercom chimed. A resolute rail of a man with buzzed hair and metal-rimmed Wayfarer-style glasses, Crook, then just 41, was one of the most influential minds in the emerging field of deep ocean drilling, directing all engineering for his employer, Global Marine, from a large office on the second floor of its headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. The building was an area landmark, an ornate Art Deco tower with a soaring 3-story lobby, known as the Fine Arts Building, and informally as the Havenstrite Building, for the eccentric oil wildcatter Russell E. Havenstrite, who once occupied its posh full-floor penthouse. Global Marine was only 19 years old, but already an industry leader, with the most versatile offshore drilling fleet in the world, according to its 1968 sales brochure. In just 2.5 years, from 1965 to the middle of 1967, Global Marine had designed and built 5 heavy ocean-going self-propelled drilling ships, including 2 400-foot, 11,000-ton vessels that were the largest of their kind ever built. And every one of them came to be under the direction of Curtis Crook, who had been with Global Marine since its founding. Crook grew up in New York City as the youngest of 4 kids. His father, a GMAC executive, was wounded in World War I and eventually died of complications from those injuries when Curtis was only 7. But he left the family well off, and Curtis had a happy, uneventful childhood and adolescence in Forest Hills, Queens, home of the U.S. Open at the West Side Tennis Club, until going west for college to learn everything he could about boats and the ocean at UCLA and then UC Berkeley. Dozens of talented men worked under the handsome, charming, disarmingly easygoing Crook, who favored loosely knotted ties and off-the-rack button-downs at a time when executives wore suits. He drove a red Ferrari 250 California, typically very fast, and was known for being the calm, reasonable person in any room. Crook was the only man on the executive floor who never closed his office door, which endeared him to his engineers, who loved him and the work. They came to Global Marine for the opportunity to build ships and plunder the deep ocean, a realm that, in 1969, was as much of a mystery to humankind as outer space. Crook was a development engineer himself, with experience in fluid mechanics, hydrodynamics, and oceanography. But his real talent was in management and business development. He was a born leader, so comfortable in his position and skin that he often took afternoon naps upright in his chair, with his feet on the desk and the door wide open. "I've got a man on the phone who says he needs to see you," Crook's secretary said, interrupting the meeting. "Who is he?" Crook replied. "He won't tell me. but he says it's extremely important. Tell him I'm in the middle of something, and please take a message." Crook resumed the conversation with his engineers, but moments later, the intercom sounded again. This time, his secretary reported that the man was very persistent and wasn't taking the hint. He wanted Crook to know that he was a potential customer, with a large piece of business requiring immediate attention. He absolutely could not wait. This was certainly unusual. Crook was annoyed, but also curious about the man and the message he so desperately wanted to share. Still, he was in a meeting. Crook asked his secretary to tell the man that, as he'd already stated, he was busy, but he'd be willing to see him later that morning, when the schedule cleared, if she could set something up. 5 minutes later, the intercom buzzed again. "I'm sorry, Mr. Crook, but now the man is here with 2 other men, and he says he needs to see you immediately." The engineers sitting around Crook looked at their boss, wondering how he might react, and he was chewing on that notion himself when his door opened, and 3 men, all in suits, strutted through. The one who appeared to be in charge was about 40 and of average height, but thick in the shoulders and middle. He had black hair, parted on the left and slicked back. And as soon as he and his colleagues were through the office door, he closed it behind them. A brash display even more jarring to Crook, because he rarely ever shut that door himself. The entry was so sudden, so surprising, so brazen, that Crook just stared up at the intruders through the tinted lenses of his glasses. He apologized to his engineers and asked if they could resume the meeting later. As soon as they left, the man with the slicked hair spoke. "Mr. Crook, I'm John Parangoski," he said. "This is Alex Holzer and Paul Evans. And we all work for the Central Intelligence Agency. I assume you know what that is. Now," he said, approaching the round table where Crook had been sitting, "do you mind if we sit down?" Parangoski took the chair across from Crook, while the 2 other men both pulled up chairs on the same side, to his left. "Am I supposed to just accept that this is true?" Crook said. He wasn't sure what to think. Global Marine was not a government contractor, and he'd never met an officer from the CIA, let alone done business with one. It felt like a prank. "Do you have an ID?" "We don't carry those," Parangoski replied, explaining that in his field, it wasn't good for a man to ever really be himself in public. He had plenty of business cards in various cases and desk drawers, but none of them identified his actual job, or his real name. "So, you're saying you rarely tell the truth about who you are?" Crook said and cracked a smile. "With that name you gave me, you could be Russian." By this point, he was more intrigued than annoyed. The whole episode was so bizarre and unlike anything he'd experienced before that he was curious to see what happened next. "Anyway, you've ruined my meeting and got my attention. What can I do for you?" Parangoski explained that he had been reading up on ocean drilling and was convinced that Global Marine was the only company in the country, really on the planet, that could complete a job that interested the agency. A job important enough that he, his chief scientist, Holzer, and his chief of security, Evans, had flown from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles with no advance warning to ask a single question in person. The larger context was classified, Parangoski said, so he wasn't going to be able to go into detail or answer any questions, at least not at this point. Those things would come later if they decided to work together. Crook nodded and told the man to continue. "Is it feasible, using your current technology, or technology that's within the realm of possibility, to lift something weighing several thousand tons from the bottom of the ocean at a depth of 15,000 to 20,000 feet? The question surprised Crook, but he wasn't shocked by it. Global Marine was in the business of
Sample complete. Ready to continue?